Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The luminous vault hung in the void like a monument to academic arrogance, orbiting a dead star that had given up on existence approximately 3 billion years ago, which, frankly, was how most of the researchers aboard felt about their chances of solving the mystery that had killed, let's be generous here, a modest 24 highly credentialed beings from across the galaxy. The Obsidian tablet sat in the center of the main research chamber, contained within 6 layers of shielding that hummed with enough energy to power a small moon. Not that the shielding did much good. The artifact radiated heat like a miniature sun having a particularly bad mood, and it had already demonstrated a talent for turning overly ambitious xenoarchaeologists into their constituent atoms, arranged in aesthetically unpleasing patterns across bulkheads. Amelia stood at the back of the observation deck, arms crossed, watching the assembled delegates posture and preen like birds who'd forgotten they couldn't actually fly in zero gravity. She was mid-40s, practical to a fault, and possessed the kind of patience that came from spending 2 decades brushing dust off ancient pottery while tenure committees questioned her life choices. "We shouldn't even be here," Kit whispered beside her, fidgeting with his datapad like it might spontaneously develop an escape plan. He was young, brilliant in that annoying way that made older researchers question their career trajectories, and currently radiating enough nervous energy to power a small city. "We're here because they invited us," Amelia said, keeping her voice low. "Though I'm still trying to work out if that's an honor or a setup for entertainment." "I'm leaning toward entertainment," Kit muttered, watching High Magistrate Volnath hold court at the front of the chamber. Volnath was insectoid, which meant he had too many legs, too many eyes, and entirely too much confidence for someone whose species had taken 3,000 years to invent the wheel. Not that Amelia was judging. Okay, she was absolutely judging. But he carried himself like he'd personally invented fire and was considering patenting it retroactively. "The human delegation honors us with their presence," Volnath announced, his mandibles clicking in what passed for a smile among his kind. It looked like watching someone try to crack walnuts with their face. "How delightful that you've decided to observe genuine scholarship in action." Several delegates made sounds that might have been laughter or respiratory distress. With aliens, it was hard to tell. "Genuine scholarship," Amelia repeated under her breath. "That's what we're calling 24 deaths and 0 progress? I should update my resume." Dr. Haxel moved forward, crystalline body refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't so pretentious. "The tablet predates all known civilizations by our current estimations. 800,000 years, give or take a geological epoch." "Give or take," Kit echoed weakly. "That's comforting," Haxel continued, oblivious to the commentary. "We discovered it on Mundus 88, a barren world with no atmosphere, no water, no evidence of any civilization whatsoever. Just this." They gestured toward the tablet, with appendages that might have been arms. "Sitting on the surface, waiting. Waiting to kill people, apparently," Amelia said. "It's very good at that." Watcher Uth drifted forward, contained within an environmental suit that kept their gaseous form from dissipating into the general atmosphere and making everyone very uncomfortable. Their voice emanated from speakers mounted on the suit, carrying an echo that suggested they'd been practicing their mystical entity routine in the shower. "The artifact does not kill," Uth intoned. "It rejects. There is a difference, though I would not expect younger species to comprehend the distinction." "Younger species," Kit said. "We've been spacefaring for 300 years." "A blink," Volnath said, waving a limb dismissively. My people had colonies on 6 worlds before your ancestors figured out that fire was useful for more than accidentally burning down forests. Amelia felt her jaw tighten. She'd prepared for condescension. It was practically mandatory at these gatherings, but the casual dismissal still rankled. Humanity had clawed its way to the stars through 2 world wars, 3 near extinctions, and more political disasters than most species experienced in millennia. They'd earned their seat at this table, invitation or not. The symbols, she said, cutting through Volnath's self-satisfied lecture about his species' glorious history. They change. The chamber went quiet. Haxel's crystalline structure flickered. Excuse me? The symbols on the tablet. Amelia moved forward, Kit trailing behind her like an anxious shadow. Every scan I've seen shows different markings, but scanners don't lie, which means the tablet is changing what it displays. We are aware of this phenomenon, Haxel said, their tone suggesting they were being patient with a particularly slow student. The artifact responds to observation. It is, we theorize, quantum-locked in some fashion. Or, Amelia said, stopping a few meters from the shielding, it's showing different things to different observers. Testing them, maybe. Looking for something specific. Volnath's mandibles clicked rapidly. Irritation, she'd learned. Testing for what? The honor of being incinerated? The privilege of having one's molecular bonds spontaneously dissolve? I don't know, Amelia admitted, but I've been reviewing the casualty reports. Every species that's touched it has been rejected differently. Your people burst into flames. The Crixian delegate just stopped existing. Atoms scattered across 3 cubic meters. The Venlian researcher had all the water in their body flash to steam. Your point being? Uth asked, voice echoing like they were speaking from the bottom of a very pretentious well. My point being that the tablet isn't just hot, it's hostile. Actively, specifically hostile. And it's choosing how to reject each species individually. Kit pulled up holographic data on his pad, fingers flying across the interface. She's right. The energy signatures vary by species. It's not a consistent defense mechanism, it's adaptive. Fascinating, Haxel said in a tone that suggested they found it anything but. And you believe humanity's, what? Newness? Ignorance? Will somehow allow you to succeed where civilizations millions of years older have failed? Amelia studied the tablet through the shielding, watching symbols drift across its surface like oil on water. They were beautiful, in a deeply unsettling way. Ancient. Purposeful. I believe, she said slowly, that everyone's been asking the wrong question. Oh? Volnath moved closer, towering over her with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong in his life, and wasn't planning to start now. And what question should we be asking, human? Amelia turned to face him, ignoring the way Kit's anxiety was practically radiating off him in waves. You've all been asking, how do we touch it without dying? When you should be asking, why does it want to kill us in the first place? It is an ancient defense mechanism, Uth said. This much is obvious. Is it? Amelia looked back at the tablet. Or is it looking for something? Someone? And getting increasingly annoyed that nobody's shown up yet? The chamber fell silent again, this time with a different quality. Consideration, maybe? Or possibly just disbelief that a human, was proposing a theory that hadn't occurred to them. Preposterous, Volnath said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. You suggest the artifact is, what? Waiting for a specific individual across 800,000 years? I'm suggesting, Amelia said, that we don't know what it's doing. But pattern recognition is supposed to be humanity's thing, right? We're good at seeing shapes in chaos, finding meaning where none exists, making connections that more advanced species dismiss as primitive superstition. Usually because they are primitive superstition, Haxel noted. Usually, Amelia agreed. But sometimes we're right. Sometimes the monster in the dark is real. Sometimes the ancient warning is accurate. Sometimes, and I know this is going to sound wild, sometimes our gut instincts keep us alive. Kit had gone very still beside her, his datapad forgotten. "Amelia," he said quietly, "what are you thinking?" She didn't answer immediately. Her mind was racing through fragments of information, pieces that hadn't fit together until this moment. Earth's archaeological record was full of holes, gaps where civilizations should be, but weren't. Stories of golden ages that ended in catastrophe, knowledge that was lost, wisdom that vanished overnight. Humanity's own mythology was packed with stories of fire and forbidden knowledge. Prometheus stealing from the gods, Loki's tricks, Anansi's webs, but also stories of forgetting, of knowledge deliberately hidden, of powers too dangerous to remember. "What if," she said slowly, more to herself than anyone else, "what if we're not newcomers?" "I beg your pardon?" Volnath's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. Amelia looked at the tablet again, at symbols that seemed almost familiar in a way she couldn't quite name, like a word on the tip of her tongue, a memory just out of reach. "You said the tablet is 800,000 years old. That predates every known civilization by a factor of, what, 10? 20? Which means someone made it before any of you existed, before your species left your homeworlds, before you developed language, probably." "Yes," Haxel said slowly, "which is precisely why it is so significant." "Right. So who made it?" "Because it had to be someone, and whoever they were, they disappeared, completely. No other artifacts, no ruins, no trace, just this tablet, sitting on an empty world, burning anyone who touches it." Kit's eyes went wide. "You can't be serious." "Why not?" Amelia turned to face the assembled delegates, all of whom were watching her with varying degrees of confusion and condescension. "You've all assumed that humanity's recent arrival on the galactic stage means we're young. But what if we're not young? What if we're old and we just forgot?" The laughter started with Volnath, a clicking, chittering sound that echoed through the chamber. "Forgot? Oh, that is delightful. Yes, humanity simply forgot being a galaxy-spanning civilization, misplaced it, like keys or dignity." Other delegates joined in, even Uth's speakers crackling with what might have been amusement. But Amelia wasn't laughing. She was staring at the tablet, at symbols that danced and shifted, and feeling something cold settle in her stomach. Recognition, maybe, or fear, or memory. Haxel's crystalline form stopped refracting light for a moment, which Amelia had learned meant they were experiencing something akin to profound confusion. "You are proposing that humanity, a species that only achieved faster-than-light travel 3 centuries ago, is actually an ancient civilization that somehow lost all memory, all technology, all evidence of its existence, and regressed to living in caves?" "I'm not proposing anything yet," Amelia said. "I'm thinking out loud, which I realize is a very human thing to do and probably offensive to proper academic protocol." "Wildly offensive," Haxel confirmed. "We prefer to think silently until our hypotheses are fully formed and properly footnoted." "How boring for you." Volnath had stopped laughing, which was somehow worse than when he'd been clicking his mandibles in amusement. Now he was studying Amelia with the kind of intensity usually reserved for particularly interesting specimens under microscopes. Let us, for the sake of argument, entertain this fantasy. What evidence could you possibly present for such an absurd claim? None, Amelia admitted cheerfully. Which is kind of the point. If humanity deliberately erased itself, we wouldn't leave evidence, would we? That would defeat the purpose. This is circular logic, Uth intoned, their gaseous forms swirling inside its containment suit. You claim lack of evidence as evidence. This is philosophically unsound. Welcome to humanity, Kit muttered, where we make up theories and the evidence doesn't matter. But Amelia's mind was racing now, connections forming faster than she could articulate them. Earth's archaeological record has gaps, huge ones. We have creation myths from every culture that talk about golden ages, about times when humans possessed incredible knowledge. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Mayans, they all claimed their wisdom came from before, from a time they couldn't quite remember. Mythology, Volnath said dismissively. Every species has stories of better times. It is called nostalgia, or, in less charitable terms, lying about the past to avoid confronting present mediocrity. Usually, yeah. But what if sometimes the myths are memory, distorted, corrupted by time and oral tradition, but memory nonetheless? Haxel moved closer to the observation platform, their form catching the light in ways that suggested deep thought or possibly indigestion. The tablet's age predates humanity's documented evolution. Your species, according to every genetic analysis, every fossil record, is approximately 300,000 years old. The tablet is 800,000 years old. The mathematics do not support your hypothesis. The mathematics don't support anything about this tablet, Amelia countered. It shouldn't exist. The materials shouldn't exist. Nothing in the known universe can generate that kind of sustained thermal output without a power source, and you've scanned it 6 ways from Sunday. No power source, no circuitry, no technology you can identify. Which makes it fascinating, Haxel said. Not evidence of human origin. I know. Amelia rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache forming behind her eyes. Look, I'm probably wrong. I'm probably very wrong. You're right. We're young, we're inexperienced, and we have no business being at this summit except as observers. Finally, Volnath said, the human speaks sense. But, Amelia continued, ignoring him, you invited us anyway. Why? The question hung in the air like smoke, and suddenly no one seemed eager to answer. Haxel's form flickered. Uth's gaseous body swirled a bit faster in its containment. Volnath's mandibles went very, very still. You invited the youngest, most inexperienced species to the most important archaeological discovery in galactic history, Amelia said slowly. After 24 deaths from other species trying to study it. After 800,000 years of this thing sitting on a dead world, waiting. You invited us. Why? Kit had pulled up more data, his fingers moving across the interface with increasing urgency. Amelia, the invitation was sent 5 months ago, but the decision to bring the tablet to the luminous vault was made 6 months ago. Which means you decided to study it here, then invited humanity specifically. Amelia felt something cold settle in her chest. You were waiting to invite us until it was in position. This wasn't about including us in the galactic academic community. This was about, what? Testing us? Seeing if we'd take the bait? Bait is such an ugly word, Uth said, their voice losing some of its mystical quality and taking on something more businesslike. We prefer to think of it as an opportunity for humanity to demonstrate its compatibility with certain ancient artifacts. Compatibility. Amelia's voice was flat. You think there's a connection between humanity and the tablet? We theorized, Haxel admitted, their academic tone returning. When we discovered the artifact, we conducted extensive analysis. The symbols, while unreadable, contained certain mathematical patterns. Patterns that, when mapped, bore a striking resemblance to human genetic markers. The chamber seemed to tilt slightly, or maybe that was just Amelia's sense of reality adjusting to new parameters. You're saying the tablet has human DNA encoded in it. Not DNA precisely, Haxel said, but similar enough that our xenogeneticists flagged it as worth investigating. Of course, we assumed it was coincidence. Humanity is far too young to have any connection to the artifact. But then you started losing researchers, Amelia said. And you thought, what? Maybe throw the humans at it and see what happens? Research is often about testing hypotheses, Volnath said, his mandibles clicking slowly. Sometimes those tests are dangerous. Sometimes they involve species who are, how shall I put this delicately, expendable. Kit made a sound halfway between a laugh and a gasp. You invited us here to die. To attempt contact, Uth corrected. Death was merely the statistically probable outcome. But if you succeeded, and admittedly, we gave this perhaps a 2% probability, then we would learn something valuable about the artifact's nature. 2%, Kit repeated. You gave us a 2% chance of survival, and didn't mention it in the invitation. It was implied in the footnotes, Haxel said. Did you not read the footnotes? The footnotes were 600 pages long, which is why we included them. Thoroughness is the foundation of good science. Amelia found herself laughing, though there wasn't much humor in it. So, let me get this straight. You find an artifact with possible human genetic markers encoded in it. You lose 24 researchers trying to study it. And your solution is to invite the humans, not tell them about the genetic connection, and see if we spontaneously solve the problem or die trying. When you phrase it that way, it does sound rather callous, Volnath admitted. But consider the alternative. We could have simply conscripted human researchers without the courtesy of an invitation. That's not better. That's not a better alternative. I thought it was quite generous, personally. Kit was pacing now, his nervous energy finding an outlet in movement. This is insane. We should leave. We should absolutely leave right now and file a formal complaint with someone official who handles galactic species, trying to murder other species through aggressive archaeology. We could, Amelia said, still staring at the tablet. But we won't. We won't? No. She stepped closer to the shielding, close enough to feel the heat radiating through 6 layers of protection. The symbols were moving faster now, almost agitated, or excited. Because they're right. There is a connection. I can feel it. Feel it? Kit's voice had gone up an octave. Since when do we do xenoarchaeology based on feelings? Since we started studying artifacts that kill people for touching them wrong, Amelia said. Haxel, pull up the genetic marker analysis. The crystalline being hesitated, then complied. Holographic displays bloomed in the air, showing complex molecular structures that meant nothing to Amelia, but apparently meant something to the 3 alien species watching with increasing interest. Here, Haxel said, highlighting a sequence. This pattern repeats throughout the tablet's symbol structure. And here, another highlight, is the corresponding pattern in human DNA. Base pair sequencing is different, obviously, but the mathematical relationship is identical. How identical? 99.3% correlation. The chamber went quiet again. That was too precise to be coincidence, too specific to be chance. So either, Amelia said slowly, humanity's genetic structure was influenced by whoever made this tablet, or whoever made this tablet was human, or something that became human, or something humans became from. She paused. Language doesn't really have good words for this kind of temporal weirdness. The second option is chronologically impossible, Volnath said, but he didn't sound as certain as before. Humanity did not exist 800,000 years ago. This is established fact. Fossil records, genetic dating, evolutionary trees, all of it confirms humanity's recent emergence. On Earth, Amelia said. It confirms humanity's recent emergence on Earth. Uth's gaseous form had gone very still. You are suggesting humanity evolved elsewhere, achieved advanced civilization, built this artifact, then what? Moved to Earth and started over? I'm suggesting we don't know what happened. But something did. Something that left a tablet on a dead world with human genetic markers encoded in it, waiting for someone to come along and touch it. Someone human, Kit said quietly. It's been waiting for a human. Which brings us back to the original problem, Haxel noted. The tablet incinerates, dissolves, or otherwise catastrophically eliminates anyone who attempts physical contact, including, we must assume, humans, unless you believe your species is somehow immune to molecular disassociation? Amelia studied the tablet, watching symbols flow across its surface like water, like fire, like something alive and aware. I don't think it's trying to kill us. I think it's testing us, making sure we're ready. Ready for what? To remember. The word came out before Amelia fully understood why she'd said it. But as soon as it left her mouth, she knew it was right. The tablet wasn't a weapon or a defense mechanism. It was a lock. And somewhere in humanity's genetic code, scattered across billions of individuals over hundreds of thousands of years, was the key. This is madness, Volnath said, but his clicking had taken on a nervous quality. You cannot be seriously considering touching the artifact. Oh, I'm definitely considering it. Amelia! Kit grabbed her arm, his grip tight enough to hurt. You'll die. The tablet has killed everyone who's tried. Everyone. You're not special just because you're human. Maybe not, Amelia said, gently removing his hand. But maybe I am. Maybe we all are. Maybe that's why we forgot in the first place, because being special was too dangerous, too frightening, too much responsibility. Or maybe, Haxel said quietly, you are about to become casualty number 25, and we will learn nothing except that humans are as mortal as everyone else. Only one way to find out, Amelia said, and started walking toward the shielding controls. Kit's voice followed her, high and panicked. This is a terrible idea. This is possibly the worst idea in the history of bad ideas. We should vote on this. We should form a committee. We should see what happens, Amelia said, her hand hovering over the control panel, when someone who might be coming home finally knocks on the door. She pressed the button. The shielding began to power down, layers dropping one by one, and the temperature in the chamber started to rise. The tablet waited, patient as time, its surface reflecting light that shouldn't exist, showing symbols that couldn't be read. Waiting, Amelia thought, for someone to say the right words. Waiting for someone to remember. The heat hit Amelia like a physical force, waves of thermal energy that made her skin prickle and her eyes water. The last layer of shielding dropped with a hum that sounded almost mournful, like the ship itself was mourning her impending death. "Final chance to reconsider," Volnath called out, his voice carrying across the chamber. "Though I admit, from a purely academic standpoint, I am curious to see how the artifact eliminates humans specifically. Will you burn, dissolve, simply cease to exist in any meaningful form?" "Your concern is touching," Amelia said, not taking her eyes off the tablet. "Really? I'm feeling very supported right now." Kit had backed up to the far wall, his datapad clutched against his chest like a shield. "For the record, I am formally objecting to this course of action. I want it noted in the official logs that I said this was a terrible idea." "Noted," Haxel said, their crystalline structure already recording everything. "Your objection will be included in the casualty report." "That's not comforting." Amelia took a step closer. The tablet was maybe 3 meters away now, sitting on its pedestal like a judge waiting to pass sentence. The symbols on its surface had stopped their lazy drifting and were now moving with purpose, arranging themselves into patterns that seemed almost familiar, almost readable. Her grandmother used to tell stories, old stories, passed down through generations, about a time before time when humans knew the language of stars. Amelia had always assumed they were just stories, the kind every culture told to make sense of their place in the universe. But now, looking at symbols that felt like words she'd once known, she wondered what else her grandmother had tried to tell her. "The human is hesitating," Uth observed, their gaseous form pressing against the inside of their containment suit. "Perhaps survival instinct is finally overriding curiosity." "I'm not hesitating," Amelia said. "I'm reading." "The symbols are not readable," Haxel said flatly. "We have attempted translation through every known linguistic framework. The patterns do not correspond to any language, living or dead." "Not any language you know," Amelia murmured. The symbols were definitely arranging themselves into something coherent now, something that bypassed her eyes and spoke directly to a part of her brain that shouldn't exist. The part that remembered things that never happened, that knew facts she'd never learned. She thought about Earth's history, about civilizations that rose and fell, leaving behind monuments that shouldn't have been possible with the technology they supposedly possessed. The pyramids, Göbekli Tepe, Nan Madol, structures that made modern engineers scratch their heads and quietly question the official timelines. What if the timelines were wrong? What if humanity hadn't climbed slowly from caves to cities, but had fallen from something higher? What if forgetting had been the plan all along? "Amelia," Kit's voice cracked. "Please, we can study this another way. We can run more tests, gather more data." "We've gathered enough data," Amelia said. 24 dead researchers worth of data. Time for a different approach." She took another step. The heat was intense now, pressing against her skin like a hand pushing her back, warning her, testing her, making sure she really wanted this. Behind her, she heard Volnath say something to Haxel in a language she didn't speak. The crystalline being responded in kind. They were probably discussing blast radius, casualty containment, how to dispose of human remains in a way that wouldn't create diplomatic incidents. Another step. Close enough now to touch, if she reached out. The tablet's surface was perfectly smooth, reflecting her face back at her with unnatural clarity. She looked tired, older than her years, but also determined in a way she hadn't been in a long time. "The artifact's temperature is increasing," Haxel announced, their scientific detachment returning. "Surface temperature now exceeds 3,000 degrees. Atmospheric oxygen in the immediate vicinity is beginning to combust." "Fantastic," Kit said weakly. "That's fantastic news. Very encouraging." But Amelia noticed something the sensors apparently hadn't. The heat wasn't random. It pulsed in patterns, rhythmic like a heartbeat, like breathing, like something alive waiting to see what she would do next. She lifted her hand. Her palm was maybe 30 centimeters from the tablet's surface now, close enough to feel the air itself burning away. This was the point of no return. This was where every other researcher had made their fatal mistake, had committed to the action that would end their existence in increasingly creative ways. "Don't," Kit whispered, but there was no force behind it. He knew she was going to do it anyway. "Last words?" Volnath asked, and there was something in his voice now. Not mockery exactly. Respect, maybe. Or possibly just academic curiosity about what humans said before they died stupidly. Amelia thought about it. Last words should matter. Should mean something. Should encapsulate some essential truth about existence or humanity, or the nature of consciousness. Instead, she said, "If this kills me, Kit gets my research notes, and someone needs to feed my cat." "You don't have a cat," Kit said. "Then someone needs to get me a cat posthumously. I feel like I've earned it." She placed her hand on the tablet. The world went white. Not hot, not burning, not the sensation of flesh being vaporized or molecules being scattered across 3 dimensions. Just white, pure, and complete, like falling into the heart of a star that had forgotten how to be angry. And then the memories hit. Not her memories. Or maybe they were. She couldn't tell anymore. Memories of standing on worlds that no longer existed, under stars that had burned out millennia ago. Memories of cities that stretched across continents, of ships that moved between galaxies like thoughts, of knowledge so vast it had to be stored in genetic code because no database could hold it all. Memories of being human when human meant something different, something more. She saw the Empire. Not an empire of conquest. Humanity had tried that once, early on, and learned better. An empire of archivists, of librarians, of beings who had appointed themselves the keepers of everyone else's history because someone had to and nobody else seemed interested in the job. Humanity cataloging the rise and fall of 10,000 civilizations, recording their languages, their art, their philosophies, their mistakes. Being the memory of a galaxy that had a terrible habit of forgetting where it came from. And then she saw why they'd forgotten. The other species, younger then, more aggressive, still figuring out that stabbing each other was counterproductive, had grown afraid. Humanity knew too much, remembered too much, could topple governments with information, could destroy species with the casual revelation of their true histories. Knowledge was power, and humanity had all of it, which made them either gods or targets, and the galaxy had a long history of killing its gods. So they'd faced a choice: fight and win, and become the tyrants they'd spent millennia documenting. Or leave, not physically. That would accomplish nothing. But mentally, genetically, existentially. They chose to forget. She saw the process, brutal in its elegance, a genetic modification that would cascade through the entire species over generations. Not removing the memories, those were encoded too deeply, but locking them away, burying them under layers of instinct and evolution and time. Scattering humanity across primitive worlds where they could start fresh, could be small, could be safe in their ignorance. Earth had been one of those worlds, a witness protection program for a species that knew too much. But they'd left insurance. Tablets like this one, scattered across dead worlds, waiting for the day when humanity might need to remember. When forgetting was no longer the safest option. waiting for someone to come along and say the words that would unlock everything they'd deliberately locked away. The white faded. The chamber came back into focus, but different now. Clearer. She could see the molecular structure of the walls, the quantum states of the lights, the genetic markers of every being in the room laid out like open books. The tablet under her palm was cool now, comfortable, like coming home after a very, very long time away. She looked at Vulnath, at Haxel, at Uth, and she remembered them. Not these individuals specifically, but their species. Remembered teaching their ancestors to read, to write, to think. Remembered the Vulnathi plague that had almost destroyed them before humanity shared the cure. Remembered uplifting the Haxel from mineral deposits that had just started achieving basic consciousness. Remembered negotiating peace between the Uth's first colonies when they couldn't agree on what shape to be. She remembered all of it, and slowly, carefully, with a voice that carried 800,000 years of weight, Amelia said the words that had been waiting in her genetic code since before her species knew what genes were. I remember. The tablet opened. The tablet didn't so much open as unfold, layers of obsidian peeling back in ways that violated several fundamental laws of physics, and at least two that Amelia was pretty sure humanity had invented just to have something to violate. Light poured out. Not visible light exactly, but something that made the concept of visibility seem quaint and outdated. Holographic data erupted into the chamber like a dam breaking, filling every available space with information that had been compressed and waiting for 800,000 years. Star maps bloomed across the ceiling, showing territories that dwarfed the current galactic civilization's holdings. Technology schematics rotated in the air, designs so advanced that the ship's computers began overheating just trying to catalog them. And files. Thousands upon thousands of files, each one a complete record of a civilization. Languages, customs, genetic data, historical archives, embarrassing incidents they'd tried to erase from their official records, but humanity had dutifully preserved because that was the job. Kit had fallen to his knees, staring up at the data waterfall with an expression somewhere between religious ecstasy and complete mental breakdown. This is... He couldn't finish the sentence. His datapad was screaming alerts, trying to process information it was never designed to handle. Vulnath had gone very still, which for an insectoid meant his mandibles had locked in place, and his too many legs had frozen mid-step. He was staring at a particular holographic display, one that showed his species' history. The real history, not the sanitized version they taught in schools. That's not, he started, then stopped. We didn't. Another stop. Then, quietly, almost too quiet to hear, we asked you for help. You did, Amelia said, and her voice sounded different now, older, layered with memory. The Vulnathi plague, approximately 420,000 years ago. Your species was down to maybe 200,000 individuals. You sent a call into space, desperate, not expecting anyone to answer. And humanity answered, Vulnath finished. We don't remember this. Our histories speak of developing the cure ourselves, through our own ingenuity. You did develop it, Amelia said. We just pointed you in the right direction, gave you the tools, let you think it was your achievement, because that's what you needed to build confidence as a species. Taking credit wasn't the point. Survival was. Haxel's crystalline form had stopped refracting light entirely, a sign of profound shock. They were staring at their own species file, at data that showed their evolutionary history. We were uplifted. We weren't naturally intelligent. You, humanity, You modified our base mineral structure to allow for consciousness. You were already conscious, Amelia corrected gently. Just very, very slow. Thinking one thought per decade isn't conducive to building civilizations. We just sped up your processing time and gave you the ability to store complex memories. Everything else, you did yourselves. But why? Haxel's voice had lost all its academic superiority. Now they just sounded confused, almost hurt. Why do this for species you'd never met? What did you gain? Nothing, Amelia said. That was the point. We didn't uplift species to control them or exploit them. We did it because we could, and because watching civilizations develop is fascinating, and because someone had to keep records in case you ever wondered where you came from. Uth's gaseous form was swirling rapidly inside its containment suit, agitation made visible. Our philosophy, our entire system of enlightened thought, we based our civilization on it. You based your civilization on a 300-page philosophy text humanity wrote as a joke, Amelia said, unable to keep the amusement from her voice. Some human academic thought it would be funny to write deliberately pretentious nonsense and see if anyone took it seriously. You took it seriously, built a whole culture around it. We felt too guilty to tell you the truth after that. A joke, Uth repeated. Our entire civilization is based on a joke. A well-written joke, Amelia offered. Very thoughtful nonsense. The author put real effort into making it sound profound. The chamber had gone quiet, except for the hum of data still flowing from the tablet, still cataloging 800,000 years of careful record-keeping. Every species present was confronting the same revelation, that their histories were incomplete, that humanity had been there at the beginning, had helped and guided, and then deliberately stepped back to let them take credit. Why forget? Kit had found his voice again, though it was shaky. If humanity was that advanced, that powerful, why give it all up? Amelia turned to look at him, and Kit flinched slightly at what he saw in her eyes. Knowledge. Too much knowledge. The kind that came with a price. Because power corrupts. Because knowing everyone's secrets meant we could destroy anyone we wanted with information alone. Because we watched other species rise and fall and make the same mistakes, and we realized we were making them too. What mistakes? Thinking we knew better than everyone else. Thinking our role as archivists made us judges. Starting to make decisions about who deserved help and who didn't, based on our interpretation of their history. She paused. We became what we'd always documented, the ancient, powerful species that younger civilizations feared. And we remembered what always happened to those species eventually. They were destroyed, Volnath said quietly. Usually by their own people, Amelia confirmed. Internal conflict, civil war, the weight of empire crushing them from within. So we chose a different path. We chose to reset, to become small again, to forget our power before we used it badly. But you left the tablets, Haxel said. Insurance, you called it. Against what? Against this. Amelia gestured at the assembled species, at the galaxy beyond the ship, at the universe still spinning through time. Against the day when forgetting became more dangerous than remembering, when humanity needed to know what we were, what we'd been, to protect ourselves or others. And you believe that day has come? Uth asked. I believe, Amelia said slowly, that you invited us here specifically to die, or to activate this tablet, that you knew there was a connection, that you were testing us without our knowledge or consent. That feels like the kind of moment that requires remembering who we are. The silence that followed was heavy enough to have its own gravitational field. Volnath's mandibles started clicking again, slowly, nervously. "We were not trying to kill you. We were—" He stopped. "We were curious, and perhaps frightened." "Frightened of humans?" Kit laughed, high and slightly unhinged. "We're the youngest species here. We have no territory to speak of. We've been in space for 300 years. What's frightening about us?" "Your potential," Haxel said softly. "We've watched humanity's development. 300 years from first satellite to faster-than-light travel. Progress that took other species millennia. You achieved in generations. And you didn't stop. You kept pushing, kept asking questions, kept refusing to accept that things couldn't be done, because they'd never been done before. You were becoming dangerous," Volnath added, "not through aggression, through growth, through innovation, through being exactly the kind of species that could, given time, surpass us all. And we wondered if perhaps there was a reason for that potential, if perhaps you had been dangerous before. So you tested us," Amelia said, "brought us to the tablet to see what would happen, see if we'd activate it or die trying. Win-win either way. Either we solved your mystery, or you eliminated a potential threat by letting the tablet do your dirty work." "We are not proud of this reasoning," Uth admitted, "but fear makes species do regrettable things." "Yeah," Amelia said, feeling the weight of 800,000 years pressing down on her. "We know. That's why we chose to forget in the first place." Kit had managed to stand again, was moving toward her slowly, like approaching a wild animal. "Amelia, are you okay? You're still you, right?" She smiled at him, and it was her smile, tired and slightly crooked. "I'm still me, just me with a lot more context. Like suddenly remembering you left the stove on, except the stove is 800,000 years of accumulated knowledge, and the house is the entire galaxy. That's not comforting. It's not meant to be." She turned back to the assembled delegates. "So, here's what happens now. This information, all of it, is already transmitted to human networks. Every university, every library, every database humanity maintains now has complete records of who we were. We're not hiding it. We're not using it as leverage. We're just making sure everyone knows the truth." "You would share this freely?" Haxel sounded shocked. "This information could destabilize governments, rewrite histories, undermine the foundations of multiple civilizations." "Probably," Amelia agreed. "But secrets are what caused the problem in the first place. We're done with secrets. Humanity is transparent now, for better or worse." "And the technology?" Volnath gestured at the schematics still rotating in the air, designs for ships and weapons and tools that would make current science look like children playing with blocks. "You have access to power that could conquer the galaxy. What will you do with it?" Amelia was quiet for a moment, looking at the tablet, at the data, at the proof of what humanity had been and could be again. 800,000 years of advancement, waiting to be reclaimed. The temptation was enormous, to take it all back, to become powerful again, to step back into the role of elder species and show everyone how things should be done. But that was the path to forgetting why they'd forgotten in the first place. "Nothing," she said finally. "We're going to do nothing with it. We'll study it, sure, learn from it, maybe incorporate some of the less catastrophic bits into our development. But we're not rebuilding the Empire. We're not reclaiming our position as the galaxy's archivists. We chose to be small for a reason, and that reason still stands." "But you remember now," Uth said. "You cannot unknow what you know." "No," Amelia admitted. "We can't. But we can choose what we do with the knowledge. And we choose to stay small, stay humble, keep growing at our own pace instead of jumping ahead 800,000 years and skipping all the lessons we'd learn along the way. She looked at each delegate in turn. We were giants who became mice by choice. You've just seen the evidence of that choice. Don't mistake it for weakness. Don't mistake our decision to forget for inability to remember. We chose peace over power once. We'll choose it again. And if threats emerge, Volnath asked, if species arise that you cannot defeat without your ancient technology? Then we'll deal with it when it happens, Amelia said. Same as we always have, by being stubborn, creative, and too dumb to know when we're beaten. It's gotten us this far. Kit was grinning now, his panic transforming into something like pride. We're basically telling the whole galaxy that we used to be gods, and we quit because the job sucked. Essentially, yeah. That's the most human thing I've ever heard. The tablet's light was fading now, data streams slowing to a trickle as the last of the archives transmitted themselves to human systems across the galaxy. The Obsidian surface was sealing itself again, closing up like a flower at sunset. Amelia removed her hand, half expecting the heat to return, to burn her now that the test was complete. But the tablet remained cool, almost warm, like a handshake between old friends. So what now? Kit asked. Now we go home, Amelia said. We write our reports. We probably deal with a lot of very angry historians who just had their entire understanding of galactic history overturned. And we figure out what it means to be human when we finally know where we came from. She turned to leave, then paused, and looked back at the assembled delegates. Oh, and you're all invited to our next conference. Fair's fair. You invited us to yours. We'll invite you to ours. Though I should warn you, human academic conferences involve considerably more alcohol and considerably less attempt at enlightened mysticism. Will there be more revelations about our species' origins? Haxel asked. Probably, Amelia said cheerfully. We have 800,000 years of files to go through. Who knows what embarrassing details we'll find? Should be fun. She walked toward the exit, Kit trailing behind her, leaving behind a chamber full of delegates confronting the uncomfortable reality that the youngest species in the galaxy was also the oldest, and had simply been polite enough not to mention it until someone forced the issue. Turned out, humanity wasn't invited to join the galactic community after all. The galactic community was invited to remember who built the house they'd been living in all along. And humanity? Well, they were just starting to remember too, which frankly should terrify everyone involved, including humans themselves.